From Software, the studio that has brought us a series of massive single and sometimes multiplayer gameplay experiences known for their difficulty. While I personally haven't gone through and completed their entire catalog yet, there is one game that I've dabbled in, the PS4 exclusive Bloodborne. This game doesn't really need much of an introduction. Chances are if you have a PS4, you might have had this in your library at some point. Maybe you've played it a couple times, or maybe you even gave up at one of the first few bosses. Either way, it's an incredible experience, so let's dive right in. The first thing that becomes apparent is the game's setting. While most of the previous Souls game had a more medieval kind of setting, Bloodborne explores vast cities with a heavy dosage of Victorian-era architecture. The opening section of Yharnam has been permanently burned into my head. One, because of how cool and unique it is, and two, because of all the countless times I've died having to replay it. Don't forget, this is a Souls game. And since it is a Souls game, that means a lot of its story is buried underneath tons of lore and speculation from the community. The main gist is that after receiving a wicked blood transfusion, scary. This is what happens when you get blood transfusions. I had blood work done earlier today actually, and this is what happened. You awaken on the night of the hunt, and as a hunter, it looks like this is your time to shine. I said it earlier, but I honestly really love the intro area of this game. Central Yharnam may seem kinda linear at first, but it opens itself up into so many side areas, hidden alcoves, and shortcuts that make traversing the town much easier. Honestly, I think probably the biggest feature of this game besides the combat is just exploring the world itself. Every inch is just begging to be seen, and you're often rewarded for this with finding new items. There's a lot to see, and you end up just kind of getting lost in the world yourself. And the fact that the game tells you so little plays into it greatly, as like with most horror movies, the lack of information heightens your experience, as often the conclusions we come to in our minds is scarier than anything we could be told. What happened to these people? Why are the streets filled with blood? And what the hell is that? But there's no way I could give this game's world justice with words, so you'll honestly have to play it yourself to get the true experience. For now, let's move on to the combat. Bloodborne's combat system is functionally quite simple, but it can get complex as you dive further in. You'll be using your main weapon in your right hand and a secondary in your left. Your main weapon has two swinging styles, your basic swings with R1 and a charge attack with R2. Your offhand weapons aren't really for damage, however. I mean, there are certain builds that can make some of these items do decent damage, but I haven't tried one myself. You have torches, which can actually be useful in some of the dark areas, but for the most part, you'll probably just be using a gun. Now, as I said, your secondary weapons don't do much damage. So what's the point of a gun, you might ask? Well, my good friend, that's what staggering is for. You see, if you're fighting an enemy and you can interrupt one of their attacks at the right moment, they'll reel back and be stunned for a bit. From here you can sneak in some nice attacks, or you can go for the visceral. This is what makes Bloodborne Bloodborne for me. Every time you hit a visceral, you just feel enlightened, like you've just unlocked your 50th chakra or some shit. Even on my 4th playthrough doing it on the most basic enemies, it still feels good. And when you hit a boss with one of these bad boys, oh yeah. You can also trigger staggers a couple other ways, like by sneaking up and hitting enemies with charge attacks as well, but mostly you'll probably be staggering them with your gun. For your main weapons, this is where it gets interesting. And while there may not be a ton of different weapons, it makes up for it with each one being pretty distinct. I mean, you have weapons like the saw cleaver, which has pretty much become synonymous with Bloodborne itself, to weapons like great swords, giant scythes, small daggers, and a fucking gun lance. Each weapon also has a second mode which can drastically alter how that weapon attacks. Trying out and learning new weapons is kinda key to learning the game, as if you may have noticed, it's a Souls game, so yeah, it can be pretty difficult at times. That first run is gonna be a bit ridiculous. Do you know how long it took me to get past that first street in Yharnam on my first playthrough? I mean, yeah, I still die there like an idiot, but, you know, not 20 times like my first run. This game gets you hooked on a mentality of improvement. Every encounter, every boss, every playthrough. Each time you die, you're slowly learning small things like attack patterns, stagger windows, and just other helpful tricks to help you on your quest. There's also just the sheer amount of different enemies and bosses you end up fighting. We got small boys, we got big boys, crazy boys, bitch boys, and the way you fight each enemy is often changing. You've got these huge beast monstrosities where you'll have to play defensively, sneak in a hit or two, and get out before they retaliate, and then you'll move on to something like a hunter battle. These are designed to test your skill. Seeing as how you're basically fighting another player, they have pretty much access to the same tricks as you, and since they're fast, you're gonna have to adopt a more aggressive playstyle. Aggressiveness is incredibly risky in pretty much any Souls game, but if you're able to master when to be greedy, you can do some insane shit. Bloodborne itself also encourages it. Anytime you get hit, you'll see an orange bar remaining in your HP gauge, and if you can attack an enemy back before it disappears, you can get some, or if not all of your HP back, which can help save you on some blood vials. But again, you kind of have to know when this is or isn't a good move. I can't even begin to explain the amount of times I've died recklessly trying to attack an enemy to get some HP back, only to die for it. It's honestly a really addicting gameplay loop, and it's kind of the main reason I keep coming back to this game after all my playthroughs. The game is also deceptively short. I mean, your first playthrough, yeah, it's gonna take you a while, but after that, your subsequent playthroughs are gonna feel a lot shorter. The main reason is because a lot of this game can actually be optional, unless you're going for the true ending. I think this actually works well. If you end up enjoying the game, there's a lot of extra content and areas for you to find and explore if you really just want to squeeze out everything this game has. I mean, you got optional bosses, you got the hellhole that is Chalice Dungeons, and there's even a DLC which I unfortunately haven't played yet, but I do plan on getting there someday. And if you're maybe not super into the game, but you want to finish it anyway, you're not forced to do everything, so if there's some optional bosses giving you a hard time, you can just kind of say nah. Hell, I mean, what some people consider the most memorable part of the game, Castle Canehurst, is not even required to beat it. And with options like New Game Plus, there's just a lot of content for you to get out if you really end up loving this game. I've spent a pretty good amount of time in Yharnam, both alone and with friends, and knowing myself, I think I'm going to end up spending a lot more time there. So if you ever want to be part of that journey, you could come check out my Twitch. I want to say I'm going to start streaming more, but given how inconsistent I am, I can't really make any promises. But I am going to upload some of my VODs to YouTube, so if you want, you can check those out too. But until next time, I'm Twin Dragos, and I'll see you next time. Okay. Eat my fucking ass. Okay, that's exactly what he's doing. I'm an idiot. No, please leave. I am so upset.